Welcome to the Gramophone Listening Room, presented in partnership with DCS Audio. I'm Charlotte Gardner. Simple format, two younger generation musician guests who each take it in turns to share two recordings important to them, going into as much detail as they like with their explanations as to why. This is Gramophone and we love detail. And they're listening in fantastic detail because on the table here with us we have the DCS Lena system. Once my guests have shared their recordings, I will throw in one of my own, and afterwards you can find and stream the full versions of all of our choices by heading to the accompanying playlist on the Gramophone website. So, on to my two guests this episode, and we're swimming in Baroque and early music waters. We have lutenist Thomas Dunford and his arch lute. Can only be described as prolific in the recording studio as solo, duo artist in ensembles, whether that's Les Arts Florissants or his own ensemble Jupiter. Thomas, welcome. And sitting next to him is gamba player and singer Lucine Musaelian of Intesa Duo and of the Bellot Ensemble, whose debut album last year we at Gramophone enjoyed so much, Cupid's ground bass. Welcome, both of you. Thank you for being here. Let's just dive straight in. Thomas, what's your first choice?
It was B minor Mass by Charlotte Gardner.
And
the Kyrie, the very first movement.
And we're listening to the second version that he did of it as well.
Yeah, it's always different, of course, but it's always inspired.
Let's stick the headphones on and have a listen. So that was the opening Kyrie from Bach's B minor Mass as played by John Eliot Gardner with the Monteverdi Choir and English Baroque soloists. That was the later 2015 recording. Why that album? Why that track?
Well, for me, Bach is one of the greatest of all time as a musician. For me, the B minor Mass is one of the greatest works of all time. And I particularly love to hear it by John Eliot Gardner, who's a wonderful musician, and it's amazing how this that actually Bach wasn't the first one who was asked to do this mass. He wasn't the most popular musician then. There's first Handel, of course, and then Telemann, and then Bach. And so Bach decided, let's write a mass in B minor. And it's one of the most extraordinary pieces I've ever heard or played. And it starts with this huge chord of B minor with a full chorus and the orchestra. Just that B minor, and then Kyrie just those 4 bars mean a lot to the. It's just very simple. Just. Just a scale going up, but the power of D, B minor altogether. Yeah, it summarizes the whole B minor mass. Actually, when I work with Charlotte Gardner, who's kind of a mentor to me for conducting and music, he says that the first beat of that piece defines. That first Kyrie defines the whole thing, and it is a perfect piece. When you go from the beginning to the end, it is a kind of spiritual transcendent moment that is extraordinary. The inspiration that Bach had in this piece, and it's funny because my dad reminded me, we just did the tour of B minor math with John Elliott in Hong Kong and Seoul in March. Really spiritual moments. I was like, I don't usually get emotional on stage, but this time I did. And I came out, I was so sorry, John. And he said, no, it's fine. And then his wife, Gwyneth, came from the audience, and she was crying too. We were all getting pretty. This music has this power.
What does it mean when you get emotional on stage?
It's just sometimes tears show up while you just want to play music. You don't want to be the spectacle, right? But sometimes the emotion gets so strong that tears can start showing up for musicians or for the audience.
Yeah.
And it's funny because my dad, when I was there in the tour, said, when you were a kid in the car and you were a baby, I was just putting that recording all the time. It was funny.
Huh. And your dad is a gamba player?
Yeah. He plays the gamba. He was a guy born in New Jersey, New York viol player, and then cello player. And then he discovered the viol through Jordi Savall. And then he got obsessed with Jordi Savall, moved to Europe, and he met my mom in the class. And guess music brought them together.
But I think it has to be the first time I think anybody will have heard the B minor mass on solo arch lute. So.
Oh, I wasn't really taking it seriously. It was just to show the chords, but
no, but yeah. It's fantastic. John Eliot Gardner, I think most of us grew up actually with Bach played by him. For me, when I listen to his music, it's the fact that he gets to the emotional core of the piece, and it's almost not so much about his performance. It's Baroque performance, but that's not the number one priority. The number one performance priority is the words and the spirituality behind it, isn't it?
I think so, and I think it's more historical to do it that way, because we're thinking about being historical all the time and getting everything right. Of course, you need to play on a lute and you play with gut strings and you try to get Bach's sound and understand all that. But the most important is that for Bach, who was playing in that church in Leipzig, the Thomaskirche, where we actually played, you see that they're up in the corridor of the church, and he just writes every week, just because he's inspired, just because he has this faith. And everybody wants to share that moment. They're downstairs, they're listening, probably with their eyes closed. And they're just living a moment of communion together. So being B minor mass is not about getting perfectly that chord or that chord together. Of course, the technique is important, but the most important is to get to the depth of the emotion and the spiritual connection that these pieces can do.
What are you hearing on that recording from a technical or a musical perspective? On that opening Kyrie, what are the things that strike you?
Well, it's funny because I played B minor mass many times with different groups, but when I did it with John Elliott, I understood, even in his conducting, that there's a flow. It's about flow. And Bach is a lot about flow. I don't believe in this kind of every note together, perfect. It's about the shape of it, the text that talks about. So he shows it with a hand, but you hear it in the recording, Kyrie, Kyrie, eleison, and then Kyrie. It's hard to do because you could very Kyrie, and chop everything up. Yeah. But the trick is to be able to Kyrie eleison and keep on going through the entire piece. And the entire piece is like that, actually. It's just long thoughts of prayers and so there is this aspect. You have to look at the music as when you do this piece as, and I think that's what he does. He puts himself into the role of the servant of the music to really, he loves it so much, so he has to magnify what the music is, rather than saying, I'm going to do something cool, because no, that music is bigger than all of us.
It's interesting. When I was at university, my favorite module was performance practice, and this was back in the 1990s, where the whole debate over one voice to a part in Bach or multiple voices to a part in the choruses was raging. And I can remember it was like a soap opera opening the pages of early music and hearing this quarterly battle playing out in the letters pages between Joshua Rifkin for one to a part and Ton Kopman for the many voices to a part. And being a student and being very academic and liking the Maverick, in my head I was determined that one to a part must be better because it was being so well argued and there was this Maverick opinion. And the really funny thing was that when I then heard, I think it was a 1991 recording, the Bach Ensemble and Joshua Rifkin, I wanted to love it. And I didn't. And I was comparing it with the archive recording that John Elliott did all those years ago, also with the Monteverdi soloists and English Baroque players. And I mean, it was just a no-brainer to me. There's this visceral emotion, and whether it's the Kyrie or the Sanctus, you hear it and you believe it.
I think that's the most important, is the ethics in the music. Why are you doing it? What are you serving? And actually, if you look at Bach himself, like the Suite for Lute, that one, it's he wrote it for cello, then he wrote it for lute, or he first wrote it for lute, and then for some reason the lute player didn't come in. Weiss probably was his friend, and then he adapted it for viol. So they weren't so obsessed with exactly doing this or that. They were musicians. They listen to the Beatles. They say, like, give us a piece of wood, would make something out of it. And I think that's what being a musician is not, you have to, of course, respect the text and the harmony and the way it works. But the most important is, how can you convey an emotion through an instrument? And Bach is a good example of that, because he can play the organ. His favorite instruments, the viola. He can play all instruments. It's an instrument. We are instruments. So I don't know, I was in Basel studying, and they would say, I read in a treatise that you need to double the viol line in Les Voix Humaines. It's just the worst thing you've ever heard. It's just really, I don't know why they would put people through that just because they read it in a treatise. It's sad. But my teacher, Hopkinson Smith, used to say, if you want to do something, you'll always find a treatise to back you up.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean, I think in Baroque performance now, we are moving to a place where the first question is now, but does it sound any good? But I think we had to go through that whole thing before we got to where we are now. Do both of you, do you think Baroque performance and early music performance has changed in that regard over the past decade or so?
I think people are moving more towards prioritizing expression. And because more and more people are listening to Baroque music, I think part of what captures an audience is, do we feel something when we listen to this music? Do we respond to it?
Well, I've been feeling a lot listening to your first track. And it's funny, we've been talking about Viola da Gamba. You're a gamba player, but your first track does not feature a gamba. So tell us what it is and what the instrument is we're actually going to be listening to.
So the first track is from Jordi Saval's album, The Spirit of Armenia. And it's called Ankakarung. It's an anonymous medieval tune. And it's played by two duduks. And the duduk is an Armenian oboe, essentially. It's a double reed instrument, really ancient, made out of apricot wood. Has a very small range, very, very difficult to play. And yeah, I guess I would have people listen to the tuning and see how it makes them feel.
Okay, well, you pick up the Lena headphones. Thomas take the other ones and let's have a listen. Wow. Thank you so much for introducing us to that one. Now, tell us exactly why you chose it in a minute. But first, you said that the duduk is very hard to play. Why? Tell us.
Yeah. So actually, I had a sort of 10-second experience of trying it. Actually, I tried the instrument that the soloist duduk player was playing. The soloist is Haik Sarikuyumjan, a brilliant player. And yeah, you need this incredible lung capacity and this ability to inflate your cheeks. I mean, it's actually worth going online and watching people play this instrument because the amount of breath control it requires to have such delicate onsets of the notes and to hold the notes for so long. Often circular breathing is used, which is a concept I just can't personally understand.
Me too. Yeah.
But yeah, why I chose the piece. I grew up a big fan of Jordi Savall. My mom started playing viol around when I was born for fun. She was a part of this New Jersey, New York community, actually. And both my parents are from Armenia. They grew up there. And so when I saw that Jordi came out with this Armenian album, I thought it was just the greatest thing. And this track just completely took my breath away. Something about the simplicity of the melody and yet what is done with it. Just every bit of timing, every bit of tuning, the changes in timbre and sound quality are so brilliant and moving. Yeah.
I guess there's an extent to which that sort of folk music, in terms of the pacing and the improvisatory quality, it's quite similar, isn't it? I mean, when you're playing a solo gamba piece or a solo lute piece, there's that whole, it almost has to come out as though the music is being written as it's.
Yeah, you have to be on the entire time and you know, what story are you telling? And you can hear that process, I feel, through this recording.
I loved it when it drops down a further level to the really pianissimo, and presumably that is even harder to play.
Yeah, I don't know how he does it. Yeah, and the piece itself, Anka Karunk, it means crane. So the bird, obviously. And the bird is a symbol of, it represents a messenger. So it usually brings some important news. And there's some very famous folk tunes about kind of exile and that, you know, the crane comes and tells you what's going on in your homeland. And yeah, there is that kind of yearning quality in this playing and this kind of anticipatory feeling, like what's the message going to be? And so much is said with so few notes.
Have you played any Armenian folk music?
Yeah, I play quite a bit. I sing quite a bit of Armenian folk music. I think the viol actually really suits folk music, even though I don't know that Basil would necessarily approve. But yeah, there's what I love about the interaction between Armenian music and Berg music is well, any folk music is this, idea that, well, actually any music in general, we're telling a story, and that improvised quality of let's see what we can come up with, and the flexibility of what are the instruments that we have with us now, and that's sort of enough to make people feel something.
Well, let's actually listen to some Viola da Gamba now, because Thomas, I know your next choice is Gamba, and in fact Jordi Savall. What are we going to listen to?
Les Voix Humaines, which is just like you, my dad was really into Jordi Savall, and then went to study there, and I grew up listening to this music since I'm a kid, basically.
So why do you, just one thing to listen out for before we listen?
Les Voix Humaines.
Yeah.
It's another perfect piece for me, just like the Kyrie. It's a synthesis of just just like Monteverdi's simple harmonies. You go from the tonic to the dominant to the subdominant, and you've told the story of the music and the world in one very simple way, and just leaning into the beautiful dissonances. Just listen to the way he shapes getting into that fifth, and then getting into that seventh on the subdominant. Just like, it's a description of heaven for me.
Well, let's listen to Heaven. Oh, so let's talk more about it. I mean, his playing, it's so smooth and elegant. He handles his viol just as though there's nothing to it. It's just air. What do you think about his playing style?
He's got a magical guy. And what we were talking about earlier, when you listen to those duduk and the way they're living the moment and shaping, I think that's the most important thing in music. You can't put on a score how to phrase, how to time, how to feel. But when you hear that, there is feeling, there is inspiration. That's the most important thing. I think the problem with recording is that we want perfection. The problem with our time today is this technology has made us so synthetical in everything we do, trying to make everything sound clean, together, efficient. If you do a pop song, the pop agent will say, well, you have to put in infrabasses and stuff. And the whole industry is defined in a certain way where it's hard to be personal. While the things that move me most, such as the viola da gamba, the lute, the Beatles, it's and this piece, it's simplicity, authenticity. And I think it's important that even though everybody wants to make, profits and stuff so that music works, we remember what moves us, the fact that we're human, that being human is imperfect, that playing the gamba is imperfect, playing the lute is imperfect. And those things are, I don't know, I could easily have something that's perfect, but there is imperfection, and that's what makes things beautiful. If you look at a Caravaggio painting or listen to the Les Humains, there's this little things that are not exact, and that's what being alive and human is.
So what are you trying to achieve when you sit in a recording studio and say you're doing solo lute? So it's this pressure from the microphone. How do you go into yourself to make sure that what is coming out is you and emotion? And what is your approach to perfection when you're recording yourself?
So the thing is, sprezzatura, what they talk about in the Renaissance, is an important thing. That's why you listen to duduk players. I think they're in the zone when they're doing it. And the zone, it's been demonstrated even scientifically that the brain doesn't process critical thinking and creativity at the same time very well. If you want to be creative, like Freddie Mercury is on stage not looking at his videos because he just wants to do his thing, you need to let go of the analytical thinking, and you need to be in that zone of inspiration where your fingers, everything that's supposed to happen, just like this conversation, has to be flowing and natural without overthinking everything you're doing. So the trick about a recording, the trick about our society and all those telephones, mics, all those things, is that we have all those things that makes us observe ourselves and get us into critical thinking mode. And for the art, it's probably the worst thing that can happen, because I did many recordings, and in the past I was like, hey, let's try to get it right. When I recorded Bach, I remember trying to get the chaconne right because the mic was there, because that note from the lute had to be in a certain space. That makes you minimize your thinking. It doesn't get you the best chaconne. The best chaconne happens that the fourth day of the recording, when you meditate and you start listening to the music that's happening through you. And the music is happening through you. And it's there already. So you look at it. And then if you're a good instrument, which means my heartbeat, my breath, my fingers, if they're in place, then the music can happen and flow. And that's what you hear with, if I go to India, I learn sitar with my sitar master. Well, there's none of this gibberish about perfection and stuff. There's a lot of technique, but there's letting go. And I think Jordi is one of those musicians in the recording you hear, or John Elliott. They're musicians who believe in letting go and letting higher music be played rather than using things for a purpose of looking at yourself.
Lucine, what are you hearing in that recording?
I'm hearing some honest viol playing, and as a viol player, I can almost feel the detail under my fingers. The piece begins in this gorgeous, like middle range of the instrument where you feel this warmth coming through, and yeah, I empathize with what Tommy's saying about letting that flow happen and being in that kind of flow state, and you do hear Jordi in that flow state as he's going through this piece, which he must have played a million times. And the honesty comes from this imperfection in even the speed of the vibrato, which just feels very natural, very human, which matches the title, I suppose.
And what about you in the recording studio? How do you get into the zone?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I think one of the things is you don't want to do things too many times because it's slightly starts to take the meaning out of the process. I think kind of recordings I like to listen to, and I don't know if this is an illusion, but it's recordings that sound live to me, where you do hear that detail. And I think, yeah, being able to be settled in your breath and somehow ignore the mics and just think about the meaning you want to convey or the narrative. I think once if I lock onto something like that, like a narrative or a bigger arc, I can forget about those little details that would have sorted themselves out in practice before.
And presumably Mari is actually a perfect composer to do that with, because so often there is a sort of narrative to his music anyway, isn't there?
Yeah. And actually, he puts so much detail. This is from book 2, but he does put a lot of detail in his score, in his manuscript. And so there is, some information there that you can go off of. But yeah, it does feel like an improvised piece at the same time somehow.
Now, I was hearing in that there was a moment where it wasn't a trill. It sounded more like a shake. What's that?
Yeah. The flattement, yeah. It's a sort of double finger vibrato. Well, you basically flatten your second finger over the double stop in the beginning of the piece, and you sort of touch the strings very lightly, and you hear this murmur, which some people say that Les Voix Humaines refers to an organ stop. Yeah, which has this murmuring vocal quality, and so that flattement really.
Which makes sense with the piece because it's like just like very held. Yeah. What I love about it is that it's just those what you're saying when you're recording, or you're playing music. It's the same thing. It's you need to have. For me, it's an emotional thing. This is the bass. This is a question that goes with that fourth, which wants to be resolved through. It also wants to be. It's a question that wants to be resolved. Goes to the fifth, which gives a little bit of peace, and then a bigger question by the means something. What is it for you in your life? Because there's all those questions, but in the end, that's what's good about music in this piece. It's just like there's stability, there's unsettledness and stability again, and it's all about you can make it into a personal story or an emotion. But clearly, Marais or any musician, it's a way to cope with life, I think, and there's a lot of life in it. So it's not just a sequence of crescendos, pianis, and stuff. That's all technical terms we use to get together. It's a sequence of feelings.
Yeah. Well, let's move to your second choice. What is it?
My second choice is from the album Regina Bastarda by Paolo Pandolfo and La Padrina. And it's a dedication to the tradition of Viola Bastarda music. And the track is after Suzanne un Jour, this famous 16th century French chanson. And it's Divisions by Orazio Bassani.
Okay, well, let's have a listen. it's almost, this sounds derogatory to the viola da gamba, I don't mean it that way, but to hear a viol sounding so excited and enraptured, it's not so often that you hear that. It's so often it's quite meditative stuff that you hear. And then there's this. Why did you choose it?
Well, I think for that reason almost. I really admire Pandolfo as a player. I think he's, again, this master storyteller, because, viola bastarda music is the tradition was mostly improvised, and we only have a few kind of written pieces like this one. And what you see on the page is just a bunch of notes, really, but they're based on this, Suzanne Anjou, this melody that everyone knew, and this story behind it, of course. And so what I loved about Paul's interpretation is that you can hear that vocal quality in spite of, all these notes on the page, supposedly. And he creates this incredible momentum, and he sort of takes you on a journey you don't expect. Like the clip we heard in the beginning, he goes up to this beautiful high point, and it's super, super delicate and supported by this double harp. And then, he comes back down into the depths of the viol. And, you have the organ again and the richer sort of continuo theme. And the instrument itself, it's different from the viol we heard Jordi play. So Jordi's viol would have been modeled after maybe in late 17th century or early 18th century French instrument, which has a kind of darker, warmer sound, whereas the viola bastarda is sort of in between. That's why it has its name. It's sort of in between size with a long string length, so that you can go up really high and have this kind of pingy sound on top, but you still have those low notes, and it jumps around all over the place. So yeah, I just, when I heard this track, my mind was blown, to be honest.
And it's a sonic feast as well, isn't it, with all of the continuo color around it.
Yeah.
Would that have been just you decide what you're going to put in the background?
Yeah, definitely. So it would have been sort of what's at your disposal. And in this case, there's like an embarrassment of riches. I think there's a theorbo, organ, lirone, harp. And the lirone is one of my favorite instruments because it only had a very short lifespan in Italy. But it's another da gamba viol, which has, up to like 16 strings and practically a flat bridge, like only very slightly curved. So you cannot play one string at a time. You're playing this sort of carpet of harmonic sound, and you can't do any kind of voice leading. It's just a kind of wash, and it creates this otherworldly cloud of harmony. So that features nicely in this track as well.
Now, you're talking about carpets of sound and notes on the page. I'm actually interested with both of you. Do you tend to play off facsimiles or printed editions? And does it make a difference? I mean, because these facsimiles, they're sort of artistic things in themselves, and I can imagine them really feeding the inspiration and it being less about the notes on the page, but more about playing a picture. But they're quite hard to read. What do you two go for?
It really depends for me. I love looking at old notation, mainly because I'm a little bit of a notation nerd. I just find it interesting. It's not always the most practical choice for performance, but for example, with Murray, the writing is so beautiful. The manuscripts are so gorgeous to look at, and they're very clear. So if I'm playing a solo line, even a continuo line, actually that's a point, because often, like in Murray, you have the solo viol line in a separate book from the continuo lines. So you don't have a score where everything lines up. And I think it encourages you to listen a lot more. And maybe it requires more, quote unquote, rehearsal. So there are kind of artistic advantages in that sense. But if you're sort of having to put something together really quickly, last minute, you might choose a score where everything's very clear, a modern score.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's there's a charm to the manuscript. Like if you put the Dowland books the way it was meant to be, like around this table. You'd put the soprano over there, and then the alto here on the northwest east for the bass, and then cantus. I mean, the four parts are around the table. So there's something nice about that, and seeing, I don't know, it's like, yeah, when it was Leipzig, just touching the Bach's manuscript, it's not the same thing as seeing the writing of the master and being next to it. There's something a bit archaeological about it, where you're getting a little closer to the guys who did it. But if you want to save time, just go for a modern edition. It's with my group, we just go for modern because it's just like, oh, what's that weird oud clef?
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of, for example, in this Italian music, because the range is so huge, you have to change, or the original notation has a lot of different clefs. So it's usually a C clef moving along the staff, because you can't have so many ledger lines. You'll just take up so much space that way.
That's one of the things that I noticed actually about this piece. I mean, it's immense, isn't it? The sheer range and how hard is it to play?
It's not the easiest of the division pieces, of the bastarda pieces. It is quite challenging, I think, especially musically, to kind of shape it the way you want and to get the momentum the way you want. Also because you're trying to maintain somewhat of underlying tactus. I don't think it should be metronomic by any means, but you want to kind of honor this natural impulse underneath, and I think that's the trick of, and also what you said about sprezzatura. I mean, you don't want it to sound difficult. It is a lot of fast playing, but actually you want there to be this kind of improvised ease to it. It's supposed to sound improvised. So I think that's the trick, is letting it flow and letting go of the fact that you're, playing all over this instrument.
Now it's my turn. I think you two are both going to know what this is. It'd be interesting to know whether you know who it is and what you think of it. So let's have a listen. So, thoughts. Both of you weigh in.
Handel?
Mm-hmm.
An opera?
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm at.
I don't know which opera though.
Okay, it's Per le porte del tormento from Handel's, well, two operas actually, from Sesame and also from Imeneo. Imeneo was the later one. And funnily, I fell in love with it through Imeneo, which is a really weird thing to have happened because Imeneo totally bombed when it hit the London stage. It had an embarrassingly short run of performances. And I think the best number in it was this one right at the end. And basically, it's just got a plot that's a bit dull, or everything happens before the opera starts. And then they spend the opera talking about what happened before the opera started. And didn't go well with the London audiences. But the reason why I chose it, I mean, I fell in love with this particular album through the recording by Fabio Biondi and Europa Galante, actually, which was a Monica Piccinini and Anne Hallenberg. And with Europa Galante, you have this beautiful, like, twinkly sound. It's very light and it's delicate. That's not who this is. This is Bayon Meta and Rosemary Joshua and Freiburg Baroque. And they have this darker sound. And the reason why I chose it for today is because I really like a continuo section that you can, like, hang on to. And I love the plot continuo is really, you can hear it entering the conversation. It's not just doing a bit of accompaniment and it's up in the balance. And I love that. So I'll be interested to hear what you think of what the continuo is doing actually there. And then the other thing I'd say about this is that I just, you know how certain pieces of music have certain connotations in your head. And weirdly, the strongest connotation that I have with this piece isn't it being performed on this sumptuous stage in Göttingen where I first heard it. I had 10, 15 years ago, I had this habit of listening to music quite loud on my very nice headphones as I commuted. And I was at Marylebone Station and it was rush hour and just crowds everywhere and scurrying to the beehive, that sort of thing. And this came on my headphones and all I could see the chaos, but I was in this kind of Handel bubble with all the action on mute and just these two serene voices wrapping around each other and singing about how life is eventually sweeter if you've gone through hardships first. And it's just, so whenever I hear this song in my head, I'm thinking of chaos on mute with heaven in my ears. So, nice. Yeah. What did you two think?
Yeah, there is this beautiful sense of suspension between the voices as well. And yeah, supported by this, like, as you say, richer continuous section. And you sort of, it's like coming into the clouds and coming out again. And yeah, that gave me that kind of feeling.
Yeah, it sounds like a very wonderful opera. And yeah, the orchestra sounds good, I think. Yeah. And as you said, the continuo, continuo is a very interesting thing because it's one of those things that are not decided.
Yeah.
You have a bass line, you have bass line that helps to show where you should place the bass. And you have all the other harmonies. And you're basically being like if it's the pasta, you're being the sauce, trying to make it right flavor, right? If the violin is rushing and the cellos, what shall you do? Shall you play? I don't know, but there's many things to do, like the violin's. The violin's going somewhere. Maybe you need to be more rhythmic, or if it's going well.
And that's the point where you can think about distracting them by bringing in.
If everything's going well, that's the best thing for the continuo, because then it's, hey, the harpsichord and the viol and the lute start to make up melodies together. Let's have fun. But it doesn't happen very often. Most of the time, you gotta be, no, I'm kidding. It goes well, but I mean, one of the freeing facts for music is when it's grooving, and when you have everybody grooving, then everything happens. So the first function of the continuo, I'd say, is if the stability of the group is not there. You're basically the drummer. If an orchestra is the Beatles, you're Ringo. So once the drums are there and everything's in place, you're helping everything. Then the melodies can start to bloom, because it creates this structure, as you were talking about, tactus. I think tactus is a very important thing. It's the heartbeat. Once the heartbeats are aligned, then within the heartbeat, rubato happens, which means stealing time. But you don't steal time if there's no time.
Yeah. What about when you're recording, and particularly with Jupiter Ensemble, where you're very much in charge of what's ending up on the final tape? How much continuo do you like in the balance? Because that's the other thing. When I'm, as a recordings critic, when I'm listening to Baroque and early music, always I'm asking myself, well, where are the continuo in the balance? How high up are which instruments? You've just heard, I like a continuo I can hang on to. That's not everybody's taste. What are you thinking when you're in the production room?
My dream is to make it sound as real as the concert, as the what's happening with your human ears. So you actually hear the continuo. I just think that sometimes the continuos are just doing this simple thing, and so they turn them down because it's not together or because it's not something particularly inspired. But the continuo, when it's well done, think of Mozart. Mozart was playing all his recits with a continuo. How fun must that be? Do you really think that was a no, I don't think so. It would have been it was Mozart. It would have been like creative. If he was talking about little birds, there must have been birds. He was illustrating. Continuo is illustration. So if it's done well, it's the most fantastic thing because it's basically composing on the spot to try to help the text. And I think often we're used in recordings to turn it down because we're not doing a lot of that illustration. It takes a lot of technical skill, a lot of listening together. Put three continuos together. If they're not extremely good at their instruments and extremely good at listening and collaborating, it's not good. You need to have, it's just like human conversations. You need to make sure that everybody's tuning into each other and trying to help the purpose, which is the lines of Handel, it was Handel doing it back then. It was Bach doing it. So we got a lot to live up to.
You can tell when a continuo team knows what's going on text-wise as
Really?
well. I think so, yeah, especially in opera. I think you know what's going on. You know the humor, the joke, the syntax of the line, especially in recits, the story you're telling.
It's just that, I think. That's what, if you're playing for an audience in England and you're singing this Italian opera, what is the feeling that's there? And that's what the music is, the composition by Handel is. But the continuo should reinforce that. Like, there's this great piece by Merula. And it's just, oh, che tempo di dormire. The Virgin Mary blessing, having the child in her arms, and she's like, dormi, dormi. Just says like this. It's a really good exercise for the continuo because, no. And then she could say, Feri catene. It's like she talks about the chains lacerating Christ. She has this kind of double schizophrenic episode where she's like seeing visions of the passion. So as a continuist, it's really interesting because you can't just say Feri catene. No, yeah, you gotta follow everything, and that's one of the illustrations that's interesting to, like, if you're a continuo player, just take those two notes and see what you can do to illustrate. Now the ministers are spitting on him. Now he's getting changed. Now she's saying to him, "My child, be in peace." So you're basically like, it's a bit like John Williams in Star Wars, It's like, you need to be like, have you seen the final scene of Star Wars without John Williams? With Chewbacca going, Rawr! You have to watch that on YouTube. It's extremely funny. It looks completely ridiculous. And then you put in the John Williams music, it's like, wow! So I think continuo playing, if it's done right, is makes the movie better. If it's done wrong, then it's just a shame.
Well, to have you and the archlute, three people opposite me today. Thomas, Lucine, thank you so much. That's been fascinating discussion. And a reminder to our listeners and viewers, you can find the full version of all of our choices on the accompanying playlist on the Gramophone website, gramophone.co.uk. That's all from me. Bye. bye for now. I'll be back with another one of these very soon, and thank you both so much.
Thank you.